Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Join us every weekday at this time to discuss news, spend time in the Word, and receive answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, Kathy, it's midweek. We've been talking about faith, which is always an interesting topic as we get into the depth of it around abiding.
Yeah, we've had some good discussions this week already.
Yeah. And remember, faith is believing certainty of what God has spoken, because what he speaks is superior to our circumstances.
Yes.
It what I call trumps it. It's way bigger. He can make anything happen as we follow him, and we get the privilege of that. And he said it's certainty, and by faith, Joshua and Caleb, as we talked yesterday, gave a good report. They were commended for the difference that they had, which I loved how you phrased it yesterday. Was the 10 spies in the nation went, yeah, but it ain't going to happen. And Joshua and Caleb said, but God says, and we believe it. Let's go. And we're willing to, to move into the faith of it. And, I think as we try to describe it yesterday, I think I was sharing a little bit about, and you had raised up the topic of financial freedom.
Right.
The difference between financial freedom and wealth. So when God says, I'm giving you the abundant life, he's not promising, wealth. Some people can experience that, and we all can be wealthy at a certain level. And by the way, this is kind of funny. Every time I talk to a group of people at our retreats, and we bring up the idea of abundant life, I say, what percent of the world would you say you reside in economically? What percent of the person who makes the least amount of money in the room? And the answer is in the upper 1 to 2% of the world.
Isn't that crazy? We have no concept really of what we have sometimes.
And it's like, well, you're in a sense, we in this room, we in this country, we what we live, we're living in abundance already. Even the poorest of the poor in our country is vastly wealthier than everybody of the poor in all these other countries. So it's like, well, do you understand that? You're kind of wealthy already, but even then, and I said, I know people who make millions are not in financial freedom.
Right.
Because they do something foolish, which is spend more than they make. Or they invest in things that now suck the money out of their system, and they don't have savings, and they're not in financial freedom. So, and as I go around the room and say, based upon where you are economically, spiritually, do you think that you should be less blessed with the money you make? Would it be more spiritual if you were in a less position like the rest of the world? And everybody says, oh, no, probably not, because I said, if you believe that, then you should go all the way with it. Then sell your car, sell your house, go live in a tent, and go try to farm food in your plot of land. That's what most of the people in the world do. So if that's what you believe, and see, it's not that at all. It's God said, well, I've placed you in a certain time, certain location, certain situation that, yes, it's different than the person who lives in Africa. Yeah, it's different than the person that lives in Europe. Linda's family, I think we talked about, is German. Her family lives in Bavaria. And we've visited them many, many times. Because of their tax situation and their income, pretty much the equivalent of about, relative to Linda and I or anybody in America, they would be what would you say is equivalent to about living on 25 to 30% of what we do.
Wow. Okay.
And they don't own homes because of it. They have to rent. They have cars that they borrow for 7 to 10 years on the money. By the way, they have nice cars because they need them to last that long. So they have good solid cars. They don't travel much. They go on vacation once a year and they save up for that and try to go to some place that they can afford. They don't go out to dinner much. They don't go to entertainment. We did a retreat at this fabulous, over-the-top, spectacular city and hotel that was 20 minutes away from where Linda's cousins lived. And we said to them, hey, we're going to go to this place. Tell us what it's like. They said, we don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? It's 20, 30 minutes away from you. Yeah, we've never been there. You mean you haven't gotten in the car and just driven over there? Nope. We don't do stuff like that. And so we
a very different lifestyle.
We paid for it, invited them. Hey, come and see. This is a cool place. This is a pretty cool place. But they have a whole different mentality. So it's not about, well, should they go live like that, or should we go live like the Germans do? No, they're in Germany, we're here. By the way, they're believers, and we talked about within their system they can have financial freedom.
Right.
And they have to trust God. They have to believe God for what He says and the places He gives them and the kind of life they have. And what it looks like for them is a lot different than what it looks like for us here in America.
Right.
So the question isn't about should you try to get more wealth? Should you do this? Should you do that? It's no, you are placed by God. Now live in financial freedom, which, by the way, God promises you. And enjoy that where He guides and leads you with the principles that He gives and the blessing that He gives based upon faith, so that when Linda and I were leading that, and we're just trying to describe what faith looks like, he said, well, and we understood it. Are you living in financial freedom? And the answer was no. We're in complete bondage. We were suffering with, we could hardly afford anything, even though I was making pretty good money because we'd gone into debt. And he said, okay, I'm going to speak to that. And the first thing he said is, you got to tithe. If you tithe, I promise to bless you. Financial freedom. Remember, in the context of financial freedom, he didn't say, I'm going to just keep having you be wealthy. I'm just
pile up your storehouses.
I'm going to learn. I'm going to teach you financial freedom. Okay. Again, I'd heard that story all week, and my response was, yeah, but until I get the money, I can't tithe. We can't even live now. How am I going to tithe on something that we don't have?
Right.
And he taught me the beginning of what faith was all about was, what did you hear me say? If you tithe, I'll bless you. It is an if-then statement. And if you believe me, you will tithe. Do you believe me? See?
Right.
And I had to go through the simplicity of, well, I did hear what you said. Your spiritual truth word trumps the material. Now I have to say, do I believe it?
Right.
How would I say that? By committing to tithe.
Right.
Yes, I do. Yes, I believe it. Now, the only way I could do it, remember, he said it's certainty of things not seen. He says I can't operate it the other way, which is what we would like to do.
Right.
And that is, well, bless me.
And
then I'll tithe. And then I'll tithe. And he says, no, when you tithe, I'll bless you, and you're going to have to believe it because it hasn't happened yet, and it's going to be believed faith before it happens. Right. Certainty of what he says. Okay. So this whole aspect of faith is so critical that he tells us that this is the way life is intended to be. Okay, now let's go to a statement about this of why this is so important. So go to Hebrews 11:6. Now we talked about 11:1-3, and then he makes a statement in 11:6. What does he say?
He says, "And without faith it is impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him."
Okay, now this is an amazing verse. First of all, and this is hard to understand. He said it's impossible to please me without faith. Okay, so think of that word impossible. Right. It's impossible to please me without faith. Therefore, Kathy, what's going to happen to you the rest of your life?
Well, I'm not going to be pleasing him unless I allow him to grow my faith.
Okay, so you're going to be faced constantly with things that require faith. Not sight, not what you can figure out. And see, that's why most believers live in the natural, because they've got it all backwards. It's like, I'm going to try to manage and control this life here based upon what I can see and think through logically.
Yeah.
And I'll solve my own problems.
It just, as you're saying that just reminds me so much. This is so tied to the posture of humility. That whole, we can't please him without faith. He desires to keep us humble before him so that we can see him be God and to deliver things. And so this continual putting us in situations that require faith is a blessing, because it honestly keeps us in a posture of humility.
Yeah.
That we've got to be dependent on him.
Yeah. Think about that. When you say that, it keeps you in a posture of humility. What is that? And then why is that so significant?
That posture of humility is truly dependence. It's recognizing who we are in relation to who he is. And there is verse after verse. I'm sure you could spew off a whole slew of them, but there's verse after verse in the Bible that talks about the importance of humility and how God honors the humble and glorifies the humble. And that is, in our humility, is when we see him show off the most. So that's where I want to be. I want to be in the thick of that action. But in order to be there, I need to be walking by faith, which means I need to be humble under him.
Yeah. And
recognize my need for him.
It's interesting that the word humble, because we tend to look at it again from a American point of view, is humility is complete lowliness and letting everybody else be more important than me. And so I'll just do whatever anybody else wants to do. And he said, that's not the definition of humility. Humility is willingness. And I think something you're learning about doulos is willingness to go to a place of agreement with me.
Yeah.
And he says faith is that way of having you stay there, and it is based on humility. Is, are you willing to go to a place of agreement with me based upon what I speak, which by definition means, well, I got to hear your voice.
Right.
Are you even humble to do that, to receive it? And then he says, when you do, you experience the life of faith, which by definition, I'm going to keep you, God speaking, in dependence on me. Why? Because I love being with you.
Right.
And I like glorifying myself through fruit of transformation and changed circumstances. And so when we look at without faith, it's impossible to please God. So by definition, and again, as you look at your life, God says, I'm going to have you constantly be in a place where you can't solve it yourself.
Right.
It's going to require me of what I speak and then perform. And if you do that, you'll be pleasing me. So I'm never going to let you, God speaking, be in a place where you don't require that.
Right.
In other words, where you can manage it yourself, where you can put
Mm-hmm.
yourself in a bubble, or you can put yourself in a situation, is if I can just control everything, then I never have to worry about faith because I've got it all handled.
Yeah.
He
Can
says,
I tell you, I think as women anyway, that is one of the biggest Achilles heel for us,
yeah,
is this sense of needing to control. And I don't know if that's something as a male you have too, but I know, none of my friends would argue with me if I say, so many of us would say, oh, I'm a control freak. And until I've talked about my ladies group before, we talk so much about how God has brought that down in all of us,
yeah,
that whereas it used to be, I'm a control freak, that's who I am, it's no, I'm learning that that's not who I am. In fact, that's who the enemy says I am. But I don't need to be a control freak. And in fact, the opposite of that is what God calls me to do, to be dependent on him rather than controlling it all.
yeah, yeah.
And there's freedom in that.
It happens at two levels. Because people can say, well, I'm not a control freak. And I would say, well, I think maybe you might be. And it's this way. When you're trying to control something, you are working toward managing and producing an outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And you focus on outcome.
Yeah.
I want this to happen, and I'm going to go.
This is even good things.
Yeah,
This
even
isn't just bad. This is just good
yeah,
things. Even
yeah. I want this outcome to happen, and I'm going to go work toward making that outcome happen. And some people could say, well, I'm a control freak, so I'm trying to control every single piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that happens a lot. The other side of it is, well, I'm not trying to control everything per se, but I'm working to create that outcome.
Yes.
Which is still control.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to. I recognize that I can't control everything, but I'm going to try to create this outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes to a variety of levels, from something where people have conflict with other people,
Mm-hmm.
and their relatives or their close friends, or there's people at church, and well, I want God to make sure that person changes, so that our relationship could be healthy, because it's not healthy right now. And they need to do this, and until they do, I'm not going to forgive them, because I'm looking at outcome.
Right.
And God says, well, let me show you the truth about that, is that, hey, that person isn't going to change.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a heart to change, but I can show you how to live a life of freedom
Right.
within that. And you don't worry about the outcome. You worry about what I'm going to show you by speaking to you, and saying, well, first of all, let me take you to forgiveness, and I'll give you forgiveness. Okay, if you believe that, or willing to believe it, even though I'm experiencing unforgiveness in my heart, or difficulty, anger in my heart, which, by the way, is all legitimate, God says, let me give you forgiveness. My promise is I'll give you freedom around that, and show you the difference between that and reconciliation, which isn't going to happen.
Right.
Okay. By faith, see, what would I do? I'll go. See, I'm willing to get into an agreement with God, because I see the truth of this now, of what he's saying to me. Have I experienced it? No. Do I even believe it at this point? No. But as we'll see here, let God take you down the path, because he said, without faith, now he even says it in this verse, it's impossible to please me. He says, however, the key to this is this. There's two conditions that he lays out in this verse. Number one, you must believe, and in the English, it says that he exists. Okay. Well, okay, great. I got that one. I covered that one. No problem. God exists. No, that's not what the Greek says. And this is where the English, and we've talked about this, is so poor at translating the depth of the Greek, or the Hebrew, in this case, Greek. Because the way we translate it is that he exists. Well, the Greek says this: you must believe that I am. And it's
a very different statement.
Very different, because it says you got to believe that I am the I am. See,
Mm-hmm.
when Moses said, "Who should I say sent me?" What did God say?
I am.
Tell him I am
Tell
sent
him
you.
I am.
Tell him I am sent you. So when you see that phrase in Greek,
Mm-hmm.
it's saying, you got to believe that I'm the I am.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? That I can.
That it's all encompassing, right?
I can solve whatever
Yeah.
you got going, because I'm God, and my word trumps your circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
You got to get to that place of, do you believe that I can handle this?
Right.
Okay. All right. Secondly, he says this: believe that I'm a rewarder of those who diligently seek me. Okay. So let's talk about the elements of that. Diligently seek him. Well, we've been trying to tell people what that looks like for the last several weeks.
Right.
What is that? Diligently seek him. What is that?
That's asking. It's going, it's having intimacy with him. It's conversation with him.
That's what abiding is all about.
Yeah.
Is that I have a heart to walk with you, hear you, let you give me instruction, perform your supernatural. I'm willing to abide, remain in him. I will seek you.
It's not even just the I will seek, but diligently seek. There's intentionality. I'm not just going to sit by and let it happen. You're intentionally seeking out time to abide with him and learning to walk with him and practicing his presence, that 24/7 diligently seeking.
And if you're diligent in anything, what does that mean?
It's a continual intentional thing.
Intentional. That I am going after it, and I'm going to be faithful in going after it. When? See, if you diligently...
Even when it doesn't make sense.
No. Yeah. And seeking him is like, well, I'll just walk with you. And I'm going to purposely, diligently, constantly, always go after it, even when it doesn't make sense. Even when what the heck is going on here? These circumstances are overwhelming, and I'm under the gun, and it's heavy-hearted, and I'm struggling. God said,
and in that, even when you're weary, I think that is one of the times that I see people derail the most often.
Yeah.
Is they just get worn down and weary.
Yes.
And forget that it's at his feet that true refreshment is.
Yes. And including is that, again, the simplicity of that, what you just said, I'm tired and weary. And God says, yeah, I know. Why don't you ask me that question? Why am I tired and weary?
Right.
Well, I got something to say to you about that, because I don't want you to live that way. I want you to enjoy the walk with me. And so maybe we got to deal with some stuff there.
Right.
Because you're working too long. You're not getting enough rest. You're overwhelmed. You're running from thing to thing to thing to thing. I got to prune you.
There's no margin.
There's no margin.
There's all kinds of things. Yeah.
So let's talk about that. But he says, diligently seek me. And he says, now I'm a rewarder of those who diligently seek me. Okay, now, what is the reward?
The promise itself. He delivers. So he grows the faith in us and then delivers the promise.
He says,
we stay with it. He delivers it.
He said, there's two rewards. One, I will fulfill what I say. What's required on your part?
Staying with me, seeking and staying with him.
Without what? It's impossible to please me.
With faith, yes.
Okay, so he says, now here's what I'm going to do for you. It requires faith to please me. Okay. And our response is, okay, I'll try. I'll work at it. I'll get more faith. I'll have more faith. I get that. He says, actually, no. He says, I will reward you with what's required to please me. What do you need? Faith.
Faith.
I'll give you the reward. Let me provide the faith that you need to please me. And this is what's so wonderful about God is he says, I work both sides of the deal.
Right.
I set up the requirement. Faith is required to walk with me and to please me, and you can't walk by sight. If you
Right.
walk by sight alone, you cannot please me.
That's not faith. Yeah.
So faith is going to be required.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's hard to have. It's hard to get. It's really a struggle. He says, I know. How about if I give that to you? Oh, that'd be cool. So you'll reward me with faith. Yes. And all you got to do is believe that I can do it. I am. And that you diligently seek me to receive what I'm going to give you. So basically, he just says what? Stay with me, stay with me, stay with me. And recognize that your life is going to be a constant series of requiring you to believe what God says, to handle your circumstances, and to move you forward into the path that God has for you. And you're never going to stand still, and you're never going to be safe. But how about if I give you the grand life while you're walking in faith? Okay, now, how does he do that? Well, let's look at Hebrews 12, 1-2. He gives us the answer to the question. So you're going to reward me with faith. Yes. How? He says, well, let's look at it.
Okay. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God.
Yeah. So he says, run your own race that I set before you. Okay, so let's take that all by itself. Whose race are we running?
His race, the race that he has for us.
For you personally.
Yes.
So are you running, the next person that's at church race? No.
No, does not look like theirs.
No. Are you at the same place on the race course? See, no.
No.
So that this is why, by the way, one of the things he says is you don't have a right to judge anybody because their course is different than yours. The only thing that you are to encourage them is really simple. Are you running the race that's set out for you? Right. So when we teach abiding, see, we don't say, well, these are the 8 things you need to know and have and do. It's really simple. Learn to abide, and God will start you on his race for you. And go enjoy that and go live there. And he says, you've got to free yourself from what entangles you, from what prevents you from running the race. Okay, now we know something about that already. Without faith, it's what?
Impossible to please him.
Okay, so how would you entangle or burden the fact that you're going to struggle on the race? How would you do that if it requires faith? What would we do that would be a struggle against that?
Go to what we see often, or go to the natural or the logic.
We just say, I'll figure this out myself. He says, interesting enough, as you go that direction, you actually hamper, burden, and prevent the race that I have set for you. And you get entangled in your thinking, your walking by sight, your desire to figure things out, your plan, your activity. And he says, when you do that, you've entangled yourself and you've prevented the race that I'm willing to give you, which is going to be fantastic, the abundant life.
It's interesting, if you don't mind me inserting kind of an odd story, but there's a dream that God gave me years ago that applies with just what you're talking about right now. And years ago, I loved to run, and I would do a lot of those, the obstacle course races.
Oh, yeah.
So much fun. Had a ball doing that. My knees no longer do that. But I really did enjoy them. But at this one point, and we've talked a little bit about God, how God does speak to me in dreams.
Yep.
And I had this dream, and I was running a race. And at each obstacle that I got to, I picked something up and then continued on to do the obstacle. And as I got towards the end of the race, I had, a rock in one hand, I had something around my neck, I had something else in the other hand, and I couldn't get past the next obstacle because I had picked something up from each one that he didn't intend me to keep.
Right.
And I woke up, I'm like, what an odd dream. And so I'm writing that out and I'm asking him, what are you telling me? And he's like, I'm just reminding you that as you hit these different obstacles in life, sometimes you pick things up that hinder you from having the faith you need to complete the race.
Right.
And if you continue to carry the things that I didn't tell you to carry, you won't complete the race I had for you.
That's right.
You'll be too entangled.
Yeah.
And I think, what you're picturing there, that's that same picture. We get entangled by things that we see, we think are important, we pick up and we bring them on the race because we think we need them.
Yes.
And he's saying, no, I need you free. Just come by faith to the next obstacle. I'm going to take you through it and we're going to get on this race.
Right. Right. And as you take that, that dream, which is so beautiful, what happens is you come to a point where in essence, you just stop.
Mm-hmm.
I can't go any further and I'm going to figure out my own path. And he says,
right.
It's not possible. This is what it goes back to. Without faith, it's impossible to please me is, that is an absolute. If you're going to run the race, it's going to require faith.
Yes.
And you got to be light. You got to be in flow. You got to be believing I can do it, and that you diligently seek me, and I'll reward you with faith. And you don't get bogged down,
right,
with what entangles you and actually stops the whole thing from happening. And now you're stuck and we've talked about this, in a life of mediocrity. You're stuck in a life of difficulty. And God said, well, it doesn't need to be that way, but I can't force you to. You need to let me give you faith. And then he tells us, he said, this is how it works. Christ is the author and finisher of faith, perfecter of faith, completer of faith. Okay. Author. What does an author do?
An author actually writes the words, speaks it.
Yeah.
Has the story.
He initiates it. Okay, so Christ initiates it. Now, what we've learned about faith, how does he initiate it?
Through his spoken word, which means we need to be listening.
Okay, so he speaks something. And again, we've used this word rhema. So it's not me, I want this one. It's what do you have to say to me? Hey, Rich, if you want financial freedom, I'm gonna help you understand tithing. And if you believe it, you'll tithe, and I will give you financial freedom. That's what I said. That's what God said. He initiated faith by speaking it, and that's how it's developed. Is he always has to start it by let me speak something to you that's personal. What I want to do in your life today. When we do our abiding retreats, everybody goes around the room and they hear God speak something. He says, well, this is what I'm going to do for you. When? Right now.
Yeah.
Are you willing to abide with me and take you to faith so you can, receive it? And that's why we talk about abiding. When people learn this, is to don't leave it until you believe it and you experience it. Right. Then God will say, now I can move you on to the next place of the course. So he initiates it by speaking. Okay, secondly, God says, I will perfect it, finish it, complete it. So what does he do as well? He initiates it, but he also does what?
He's the one who actually grows it in us and then delivers it. Yeah. Okay,
now remember, the definition of faith is the certainty of what? Things not seen. What I say. Okay, there's your definition. So it's really simple. When I ask somebody, do you believe it? Well, first of all, it's based on what did you hear?
Right.
So that's always the question. What has God said to you? What has he spoken? You have an issue here. What has God said? If you abide, he's going to speak it. like this couple I was talking about yesterday, where I'm going to heal the brokenhearted. I'm brokenhearted. This people say I am brokenhearted. Okay, what does God say? He's going to heal that. Okay, now the question is, do you believe it? See, okay, you heard him initiate it. So they said to me, God said. Okay, do you believe it? Not yet.
Right.
Exactly. What has yet to happen? Christ says, I have to finish it. I've got to take you to what? Certainty that what I said is going to happen, and you now have that confidence.
Yeah.
That, yep, now I know that I know that I know. I'm certain it's going to happen. And there's a definition. So that if you're in the middle of it, which is where we all are going to be, God says, when he told me about, I'm going to give you financial freedom, you got to learn to tithe. My response was, I don't believe that. He said, I know. You heard me say it, right? Yes. Okay, I'm not asking you, Rich, to go and work at getting more faith. You can't.
Right.
Because why? It's a gift from me, a reward, a promise that I'll finish it, take it to certainty as you what? Diligently stay with me.
Right.
You stay with me. You stay in that word. You start
and so really that faith is that picture of willingness to go. It's that willingness to seek and willingness to let him complete the faith.
Yeah.
The really our only role is that willingness and then seeking. It's just trusting that he is who he is while he completes us growing in that faith and seeing it completed.
So why would you be willing?
Well, coming back to the one verse, because of who he is, because we believe he is who he says he is, and he'll do what he says he can do. So we want to be there,
and that he's going to reward you.
Yeah.
That he's going to give you the faith to believe that, and then he'll perform it.
Right.
So that you diligently seek him.
Right.
Because you've got something that you now understand is, I can't do this on my own. But he'll reward me by finishing the faith that he started, because I've already started it. And see, that's the key, is that a lot of people said, I don't even know what you're talking about. Believing, hearing, rhema, I don't understand any of that. I said, I know. Let me show you what abiding looks like. Get into the word, get into where he's having you camp out, start journaling, and you'll start to see a truth, a promise. I will heal you of this brokenheartedness. I'll give you forgiveness. I'll take you to peace. I will solve this business issue you've got. And you begin to hear it, and then once you hear it, which then people do, by the way, it's then, I don't yet believe it.
Right.
I know. But the fact that you heard it is the authoring of it. That's the beginning. That's the beginning of it, and you should rejoice.
Yeah. It reminds me of that verse of the gentleman, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief.
Yeah. Yeah, because Jesus said, if you believe, all things are possible. And he said, I believe, kinda, a little bit, but I don't have full faith yet. Could you finish my faith? Could you take my unbelief that I still struggle with and take it to faith? And Jesus said, you've said the right thing, son. That's what it takes. And by the way, in that story, the disciple, the reason that it was a struggle was his disciples couldn't do it. And they were experiencing all kinds of great acts of supernatural, and they were doing it. They were healing, casting out demons, having all kinds of cool stuff happen. Comes up against this kid who's basically equivalent of, we would call it epilepsy. He kept falling down, throwing himself in the fire, and he was demon possession. And they couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So the father goes to Jesus and says, could you help us?
Right.
And he said, oh, for heaven's sakes, how long do I need to put up with you guys? And he's talking to his disciples. All things are possible to them that believe.
Mm-hmm.
The father says, I kind of get this, but I don't yet get it. Could you help my unbelief?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. You got it. I will perform this. Okay, his
And it's
disciples.
that posture of humility you see there.
Exactly what you say. And then his disciples go to him and say, and they go privately, by the way. Why couldn't we do this?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, because you didn't let me finish your faith. You stopped. You said, you can't do it. That's it. And they were even experiencing all the supernatural and the faith with the power was coming through them. And they just said, we can't do this. And Jesus said, I know you stopped. He said, this is an interesting statement. This kind cannot come out except by prayer and fasting.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
now people have interpreted that to say, well, the demonic must have certain levels. And when you get into a really tough deaf demonic, I guess it requires prayer and fasting. And Jesus wasn't saying that at all. And here's why we know that for sure. They brought the kid to Jesus.
Right.
What did Jesus do?
He healed him.
When?
Immediately.
Right now. Did Jesus go pray and fast?
Not in that
Oh,
moment.
he didn't at all. See?
Right.
Because why? Because he had the faith to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
See, he didn't need to pray and fast because the Father said the power is in you to heal him. And he healed him. Okay, so he wasn't talking about there's levels of difficulty that when you run into that difficulty, you got to pray and fast. He said he was saying about the statement of belief, help my unbelief. He was saying, hey, boys, you're going to have to, there's going to be times when you run up against your edge of your faith. I don't believe this anymore. Nope, I don't think this is possible. Nope, I don't get it. He said, when that happens, you have to go to prayer and fasting. You got to go spend time with me.
Right.
Because what's required is I've got to finish your faith. And you recognize it. I didn't get there. I still have unbelief. He said, yeah, I know. When you recognize you have unbelief, you got to go to prayer and fasting. Fasting is just take some extra time with me. Pay attention to this. Go deeper into the word with this.
Right.
Process with me.
And sometimes, they did have rhythms of fasting in the Old Testament, and Jesus followed that. And there's something to be said to making physical space in your body.
Absolutely.
I think even, there's some practice in that too, just in intimacy with him. But.
Yeah. And remember, fasting isn't necessarily just lack of food, but it could be, okay, I'm not going to watch TV tonight. I'm going to go spend time with God. I'm not going to go do what I normally do. I'm going to go spend time with God. And he says, I can finish your faith, and the requirement is really to recognize one, you don't have it yet. And by the way, we'll talk about this, but he's going to say, if you think you have it, I'm going to test it.
Right.
James 1. Count it all joy, brothers, when you fall into various trials of many kind, because it's a testing of your faith. He said, I'm doing it. God said, I'm doing this. I'm testing. You think you have it. Well, let's go find out. Right. Linda tells a great story about forgiveness, and that she thought she had forgiveness toward this person. It wasn't me, it was somebody else. And she had been abiding and receiving, and I think I have it. I think I'm forgiven that person. We were in a car going to the airport. And I said, I asked Linda, how's it going with forgiveness? Yeah, it's good. I've forgiven this person. I'm good. And I go to God. See, I talked to God. I said, God, is that so? He says, no, not yet. So I just say to Linda, are you sure? Yes. I said, honey, are you 100% sure that you have forgiveness. Absolutely, I'm 100% sure.
Mm-hmm.
And when she said it, that person calls her on a cell phone while we're in the car and hammered her.
Mm-hmm.
And she blew her cork. And she got mad and got angry and started to verbally, express herself. And I just said, "What do you think now?" And she says, "You know what? I don't have it. I thought I did.
Right.
But God just tested me and says, I don't have faith yet of forgiveness in my heart toward this person.
Right.
I need to stay with this. I need to be in due diligence. I need to be diligent further and stay in the word until I receive it."
Right.
And
And that wasn't a reprimand. That was a
no,
highlight. That was, okay, I've got more to teach you. Stay with me. Don't get away from it too quickly, because I still want to grow this in you.
yeah. Now, why is that important? Because you make a very important statement. My failing the test is not for him to be reprimanding me or to shame
Mm-hmm.
me. Why is that? What is it? What is he doing?
His goal is perfecting that faith, completing that faith. And so he's simply showing us, it's like shining a flashlight and showing us, or putting a mirror up in front of us and showing us what he still wants to work on, and that he's still at work there, so that we are called to stay in that place until he completes it, really.
Yeah, and see, such a deep, profound expression of love. Is that this?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have faith yet,
Yeah.
but you think you do.
Right.
He
And
said it.
I don't want you to settle for less than what I
Yeah,
have for you.
because
Yeah.
without faith, it's impossible to please me, and I can't act
Yeah.
until you believe it.
Right.
So if you stop a little bit short,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to make it.
Right.
And so I love you so much that I needed to show you that you're not done, because the requirement is what? Diligently stay with me. Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm just about finished,
Right.
and you're going to walk away just a couple days too early.
Right. Right.
Stay with me, and I'll finish it. I'll perfect it. And when you get to certainty, I'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a beautiful thing. So that I love what you said about that. Is that it's not a reprimand. It's not to
Mm-hmm.
shame you. It's not to say what's wrong with you. It's actually to say, I just need you to stay with me a little
Yeah.
bit longer and let me finish, faith.
Yeah.
So that, as we talk about this faith, and we'll do this, we'll have a guest tomorrow. Will be Jeff
Mm-hmm.
Hutchin. He's a person that just is in ministry, but he's just learned the depth of abiding through one of our retreats, and he's excited about it and is understanding a little bit about what faith is all about. So we'll have some discussion
Mm-hmm.
with him about that. But if you have questions, please email us at questions@afjministry.com, questions@afjministry.com, or you can put it in the comments section on the YouTube, and we'll get them, and then we'll answer some of these questions. So, Kathy, we just had a really great time today talking about the beauty of without faith, it's impossible to please
Mm-hmm.
him. But he says, how about if I work both sides of it?
Yeah.
Just stay with me, and I'll author it. I'll
Mm-hmm.
speak it to you, and then you'll start to hear what I'm going to say. And then secondly, I'll work you through to the finishing, completing of certainty that what he
Mm-hmm.
said, he will perform it, and then he will perform it. So that's how
Yes.
cool is that?
Can I add one
Yeah.
little snippet if we
Yep.
have time?
Yep.
Because the word is in the Hebrews 12:1 and 2, when it says, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. That word for endured struck me one day, and it has stayed with me. It's the word hupomeno. Hupomeno. And when you break that into the pieces, the meno, as we know, as we've talked about before, is abide.
Yeah.
And it's that abiding in the word that he has spoken. And the hupo is to subordinate or to come under. And I love when we're talking about letting God grow our faith. And you look at the example of Jesus, who he knew God had spoken a word, he knew what was on the other side, There were things that had to happen in the process. The power for endurance came from that word for endurance is hupomino. It was staying under the word that was spoken.
Yes.
And that's that picture of staying with faith all the way through and really enduring until we see it come all the way to fruition, is staying under the word that is spoken, hupomino. And it's a beautiful picture. Yeah. And it's exactly what Jesus did in order to endure the worst of things,
Yep.
you know?
Yep. And let's, we're going to have our guest tomorrow, but on Friday, let's pick up with that. Because we're going to talk about, his statement, which we'll get into in Romans, but faith comes from hearing from the word. And that hupomino is such a critical piece of that. Is, again, it's translated enduring, but it wasn't putting up with.
No.
It was coming under, believing. And we can talk a little bit about that with Jesus, particularly when he went to Gethsemane. Yes. Of what does that look like, including going all the way to the cross, was really standing on faith, complete faith, all the way around.
Absolutely.
So we can talk about that. So
yeah, that'll be good.
Yeah, well, remember, if you can remember to bring that up again.
I will.
We'll pick that up again. That'll be fun. Okay, well, everybody have a great day, and we'll look forward to our guest tomorrow. And thanks, Kathy. It was fun.
Sounds
being
great.
Together.
Have a great afternoon.
Yeah, you too. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.